Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Kingdom Growth. I'm your host, Mitchell Beecher, and today we're diving into some absolutely fascinating chapters in Leviticus, chapters 25 through 27. Now, if you've been following along, which I hope you have been, you know that the book of Leviticus is all about God's instructions to the Israelites on how to live holy lives, reflecting His holiness. But today's chapters take things to a whole new level, highlighting themes of rest, redemption, and God's unwavering covenant faithfulness. Now, here is a question for you as we begin. What if I told you there was a law that could wipe away any debts, restore all property that belongs to you, and even set captives free? Sounds amazing, right? Well, God thought of it first, and it is called the Year of Jubilee. It's just one of those incredible things that we are going to explore today. But before we get started, like always, let's quickly recap of what we covered in the last episode. In Leviticus 21 through 24 is a big episode. It gave us some really deep dive insights into God's instructions for priests and sacred festivals. We saw the emphasis on holiness, sacred time, worship, all pointing to the idea that God's people are set apart for His purposes. Those chapters set the stage for what we are about to uncover. So if you missed the last episode, don't worry, you can catch up later. But right now, grab your Bible, grab your notebook, grab something to write with, and let's get started. Okay, let's start chapter 25. This chapter introduces two profound concepts: the Sabbath year and the Year of Jubilee. Now, let me set the stage for you. Imagine you are an Israelite farmer. You've worked the land faithfully for 6 long years. But on the 7th year, God commands you to let the land rest. That's right. No planting, no harvesting, no pruning, nothing. The Sabbath year was a way for the Israelites to trust God's provision and recognize that everything ultimately belongs to Him. It's like God built in a reset button for creation. But the Year of Jubilee takes things to an entirely different level. Every 50th year, not only did the land rest, but debts were forgiven, slaves were set free, and property was returned to its original owners. This was the time of restoration and renewal, a fresh start for everyone. And it's not just practical, it's deeply spiritual. Leviticus 25:10 says, "Consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you is to return to your family property and to your own clan." Sound familiar? Well, that verse is inscribed in the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. But more importantly, it points us to Jesus. In Luke 4, Jesus declares that He is coming to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, the ultimate year of Jubilee. And through Him, we have freedom from sin and restoration and our relationship with God. So let's pause there just for a moment, just to reflect on how radical this idea was for the Israelites. See, in a society where land, family, heritage, the Year of Jubilee was a reminder that all of it belonged to God, to Yahweh. It was also a safeguard against systematic poverty. Imagine how transformative this could be in a world like ours today, a culture where restoration, not accumulation, takes center stage. The Jubilee teaches us that God's heart is always for redemption and renewal, not just for individuals, but entire communities. Can you imagine the faith it took to trust God during the Sabbath year and the Year of Jubilee? I mean, the Israelites really had to depend entirely on God's provision. Verse 21 tells us that God promised to bless the 6th year so abundantly that it would sustain them through the entire 7th year and beyond. I mean, talk about assurance. Now, this wasn't just about agricultural cycles. It was about trusting that God would and could provide in every area of life. It is a timeless lesson for us today. Whether it's our finances, whether it's our relationships or our health, God is always calling us to trust Him fully. So here's the question for you. Are there areas in your life where you need to trust God's provision? Maybe it is finances. Maybe it's relationships. Maybe it's your job, or maybe it's even your time. The Sabbath year and the Jubilee remind us that God's it covered. God's got it covered. So let that truth sink in as we move on to the next chapter, chapter 26, which lays out blessings for obedience and consequences for disobedience. So this chapter is like a roadmap for the Israelites. Follow God's commands, and you will experience rain in its season, abundant harvest, and peace in the land. But if you rebel, the consequences are and were severe: famine, defeat, exile. The heart of this chapter is actually found in verse 12. So Leviticus 26:12. I will walk among you and be your God, and you will be my people. That's God's desire, a relationship with his people. But here's the kicker. Even when the Israelites turned away, God's faithfulness never wavered. Verse 44 and 45 shows us his promise to remember the covenant. It's incredible. Even in judgment, God's mercy is present. He never just writes us off. So think about this. Obedience to God's commands wasn't just about avoiding punishment. It was about experience the fullness of life that God intended for us and for the Israelites. Blessings like rain in its season, abundant harvest, and peace were tangible expressions of God's care. But more than that, these blessings represented the intimacy of walking with God. Imagine having the creator of the universe not just watching over you, but walking with you. That's the relationship God desires, even today. And this is the connection to Jesus. He fulfills the covenant perfectly. When Israel failed, Jesus succeeded. He took the curse of sin upon himself so that we could experience the blessings of being in God's family. And this chapter reminds us that our relationship with God is not about rules. It's about life-giving connection that changes everything. So finally, for today, chapter 27. Now, this chapter might feel a bit different because it's all about the vows and dedications. The Israelites could dedicate people, they could dedicate animals and even property to God, and they were specific guidelines for redeeming those dedications. One standout verse is in this chapter, Leviticus 27:30. A tithe of everything from the land, whether grain from the soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. This reminds us of the importance of stewardship. Everything that we have belongs to God, and we're called to honor him with our resources. Jesus, of course, exemplifies the ultimate dedication. He gave his very life for us, fulfilling the law in its entirety. And to think about this, when we dedicate something to God, we're acknowledging that he is the source of all we have. It's not about losing something. It's about gaining the privilege and partnering with God's purposes. How powerful is that? Now, what a journey we just went through. The year of Jubilee, the year of the Sabbath, the blessing, the curses, the dedication of vows, all point to this one incredible truth. And that is God's faithfulness never fails. And here's my challenge for you today. Take some time to reflect on an area in your life where you need to trust God's provision and consider how you can dedicate your resources. Whether it's time, talents, as we talked about before, resources that you might have, possessions. How can you dedicate it and them to him? So next time we're diving into Numbers 1-4. So congratulations. We actually finished Leviticus. Thank you. Well done. So Numbers 1-4 is where the Israelites, they get organized for their journey. And trust me, it's going to be exciting. You do not want to miss it. So if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget, like always, to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share this video with someone who could use a little bit of encouragement today. And check out our website at www.bekingdombuilders.com for more resources. And until next time, stay blessed.